Now, you might have a hard time believing me about this, but there was a time when Chris Hansen was one of the most recognizable faces on American television. I kid you not. People used to look up to him. This man was a respected journalist who used to catch internet weirdos. People trusted him. So when he said he was going to be taking on Onision's case, a lot of people believed him. There were a lot of people out there who genuinely thought that Onision's time had finally come. But, well, it didn't exactly work out that way. Hey, what's up, Plug Gang? Today, I'm here to tell you about how Chris Hansen used Onision's notoriety for his own gain. And boy, is this drama messy. In order to actually do that, though, there are a number of really important questions that I need to answer. So let's start off with the most obvious question of all. Why did Chris Hansen get involved? And the only right answer is money. Right from the very beginning, he has never cared about anything else, least of all Onision's victims, and not a single moment of his involvement has been driven by anything other than greed. Now that I've got that off my chest, let's get into the reasons why. On January 14th, 2019, Chris Hansen was arrested by the Connecticut police on charges of larceny. He'd had 2 checks worth over $13,000 bounce while trying to pay a vendor for merchandise. To make matters even worse, it was around this time that the landlord of his apartment in Manhattan decided they were going to take him to court for failing to pay his rent on time. Just to put things into perspective for you, an article by the Daily Mail, trust me, I know, estimates that Chris owed close to $1.5 million in taxes and mortgage payments. It's pretty obvious that Chris was having some major money issues. I think this is what English teachers call foreshadowing. The charges were later dropped and settled out of court, but by that point, it was way too late, and the damage had already been done. No one wanted to work with him anymore, and he was basically fired from his job, with his reputation in literal ruin. It's not like Chris had much of a choice on where to go next. So naturally, he turned to YouTube. Of course he did. It was the natural choice. He could make the same style content that he'd become famous for in the first place, and he would have complete creative control. Now, to anyone who has been on YouTube long enough, it's kind of obvious that creating any kind of major following takes time. You can't just show up with a cool backwards hat and expect people to like you. You have to build an audience and keep them engaged. But Chris didn't really seem to understand that these things take time. And it took him a little while to start gaining any kind of traction. Not a good start for someone trying to cash in on that ad revenue. That is, of course, until Blair White introduced him to Onision's case. That was the moment things started looking up for Chris, and people finally started paying attention to his YouTube channel. For those of you who don't really know that much about him, Onision has been a pretty controversial figure on YouTube for a while now. He and his spouse, Kai, have faced a string of allegations for using their platform to minors into inappropriate relationships. I mean, it's no real secret that Onision married Kai when he was 26 and Kai was 17. Blah. Plus, there's that whole obsession he has with Eugenia Cooney. There is a reason there's such a huge anti-Onision movement on the internet. People have been trying to get rid of him for almost as long as he's had a YouTube channel. He's just real bad news, guys. So I can understand why Blair White thought it would be a good idea to get Chris involved. It's what he's known for. Catching guys like Onision is exactly the kind of thing he used to do on his TV show. It's just a shame that isn't exactly what ended up happening. Ruining the investigation. Now, when Chris first began his investigation into Onision, everything seemed to be going pretty well, and a lot of people were hopeful that justice might finally be served. He invited multiple guests onto his channel, including people who had been reporting on Onision's crap for years, actual police officers, and even a couple of Onision's victims. But it didn't take all that long for the cracks to start showing. And before too long, things were starting to get really, really weird. First thing that I want to touch on is that he flew a camera crew out to Onision's house without permission. And yeah, okay, listening to Onision tell a 911 operator that Chris Hansen is at his door is hilarious, but, well, the last time Chris Hansen showed up at someone's door, it didn't exactly end well. That seems like the kind of thing you'd want to be really careful about. Maybe it's just me, but it feels a little too much like he was doing it for shock value, as if he knew it would create buzz and keep people talking about him, rather than having a genuine interest in talking to Onision. But that's honestly nothing compared to what he would do next. And this is, well, I'm gonna be honest with you all. It's disgusting. Okay, the first victim that appeared on Chris's channel was a woman named Sarah. Sarah claimed that she had a laptop and a couple of cell phones in her possession that had concrete evidence of Kai sending her inappropriate photos while she'd been underage. This was huge. This is what people have been waiting for years! Chris told her to send him the laptop and the cell phones because he had connections to the FBI and he'd be able to pass the evidence along. Great, right? There's no way that anything could possibly go wrong. Ha ha ha! Oh no. He actually told her to send it to his assistant, Vincent Nicatra. And then all of that evidence sat in an office for 3 months before anyone realized that it had been handed over. And it had been so long since Sarah gave it to them that it would be inadmissible in court because there was no way to prove they hadn't tampered with it. That's definitely what somebody who cares about justice would do. There's no way he was holding on to it just so people would continue talking about the situation and look to him for information. No way, that would just be dumb. Obviously, this was a heavy hit to Chris's credibility. No one was going to trust him with their stories after that. Not that it stopped him from trying. In January of 2021, Chris teamed up with the production crew from Discovery Plus and released a documentary series called Onision in Real Life. I'll save you some time. It's a terrible documentary. I mean, the fact that it's on Discovery Plus is already bad enough because it means you have to pay to watch it. There are people on the internet who make this kind of content for free and who do a better job. I'm just saying. But there are several other reasons why you should not watch it. The first being that this documentary literally makes out that Chris Hansen is the guy who broke the Onision story. They literally frame it in a way that makes it seem as though no one knew what was happening until Chris walked onto the scene and discovered what was really happening. Is that not the grossest thing you've ever heard? There's an entire community of people who have spent like a decade plus keeping tabs on this guy and calling him out for his crap. And this documentary tries to undo all of that and act like nobody knew? I think Jacqueline Glenn got it right when she said this.
All he did was gather the work that everybody else did, put it into a few interviews that he then sold. He came in at the last second, basically hijacked it, and then said it was his.
We can all agree that this is the most frustrating part about this whole situation. Chris Hansen used the trust that he had from an audience that grew up watching his content and used that trust to make bank. He never cared about the victims. He never cared about the severity of Onision's alleged crimes. He just wanted an easy way to make some money. I hope ruining his reputation for a couple of dollars was worth it, because dude, God knows no one's gonna be able to trust you again. What happens next? Well, when it comes to Chris Hansen, I think it's pretty safe to say that his career practically is dead in the water at this point. I mean, you've got to know that your life sucks if you've been using Onision for clout. Things aren't looking good if that's the person you have to use in order to stay relevant. Especially not when you ruin your reputation to do it. Imagine going down in history as the guy who sold out over Onision. It's just embarrassing. I mean, people probably wouldn't have had such a problem with it if he'd actually followed through on his promises. If he'd handed the evidence over to the FBI and let them conduct a thorough investigation into the contents of the laptop. Then the documentary probably would have been received more positively. As this commenter says, Hansen really ruined any good rep he had. Kinda shot yourself in the foot there, huh, bud? But then maybe we should have seen this coming all along? This isn't the first time that Chris's involvement with a case has ruined the investigation for official authorities. During his time on To Catch a Predator, there were a number of cases that had to be thrown out because they were accused of deliberately trying to entrap the suspect, or the charges were dropped completely due to lack of evidence. Clearly, there is a history here of Chris Hansen using this kind of situation to his own advantage. Maybe he genuinely cared about the victims at one point, but I'm not so sure anymore. With Chris having more or less destroyed any possible case against Onision, fears are starting to surface on where he'll show up next. This commenter raises their concerns, saying, with Chris Hansen involved in the Davi Vanity case now too, I doubt that investigation is going to go well either. But what do you guys think? Was this all just a quick cash grab, or did he start off trying to do the right thing and just got corrupted along the way? Do you think he'll be able to come back from the backlash over this? Who do you think he'll target next? Let us know in the comments below.